It was Christmas. This was the type of Christmas that appeared flawless from the outside. As usual this time of year, Bing Crosby was crooning from the ancient Bluetooth speaker in the corner. The honey-glazed ham smelled like tradition, and the tree was adorned in gold and burgundy. The hearth crackled. The wine was flowing. Grandma's fine china was on the table. Then, as he was toasting, my brother Jason got up and tapped his fork against his wine glass before saying, "We cast our votes. We all concur that it would be preferable if you simply vanished." This pause occurred, as if time had halted for a fraction of a second. Then they burst out laughing. Real laughs, from individuals I had known my entire life. Mom smirked and said, "We'd all be better off without you." Kelly, swirling her wine like a villain in a movie. Grandma even gave a small but noticeable laugh. Around that table sat 12 people. People I'd cleaned up after, sacrificed for, and shared holidays with. And none of them appeared perplexed. Nobody appeared worried. Nobody questioned Jason's sincerity, since he was. They were aware of it. Jason flashed the cocky smile he often had when he believed he had won something. He waved his hand casually, saying, "We're not saying you should, like, die or whatever. Just vanish. Get out of there. Don't attend family events anymore. Give it up. Give it up." As if I were the issue, I sat still. My hands are in my lap. I could hardly hear anything else since my heart was beating so loudly. However, my face is tranquil, even cold, since I hadn't anticipated this. You don't have a life like mine where you don't know when anything like this is going to happen? And for years, I had anticipated it. I opened my bag, took out a simple black folder. It was not ostentatious. It wasn't necessary. The mere sound of it hitting the table was enough to silence the room. Jason blinked. "What is that?" I didn't respond. The folder simply glided across the table and came to a stop directly in front of him. "You wish for me to leave?" I finally looked him in the eyes as I spoke. "All okay. Happy Christmas." He paused. After that, I opened it. And what followed, well, it was a game changer. However, I won't begin there. Not quite yet. Because before I tell you what was in that folder, before I tell you why Mom tried to shut it down, why Jason became pale, and why his wife left, you must understand how we arrived here. Because of this moment, it has nothing to do with Christmas. One bad dinner wasn't the problem. It took years to develop. I was the one who showed up, cleaned up, paid up, and remained late for years while they took and took and took. You see, Jason has always been the best kid. Mom would blame the lighter if he set the house on fire. However, I may be accused of spoiling dinner if I sneeze too loudly. And I used to believe that they would notice me if I simply continued to be kind and helpful. That perhaps one day I might become someone who mattered and not just the family's fallback option. That's the problem with toxic families, though. They don't break you all at once. They erode you, silently, several times, till you can't even identify your own image. That Christmas, then. The breaking point wasn't that. I let them watch me stop breaking for the first time. What about the folder? And that was only the start. You don't wake up one day and discover that you are the doormat in the family. Not everything occurs at once. It begins slowly, tiny, with remorse masquerading as thankfulness and love masquerading as duty. It began for me at the age of 23. I had recently secured my first real job, which was entry-level but offered perks and a consistent salary. I recall being pleased, as if I were at last creating something for myself. Then, however, the calls began. One evening, Mom suggested, "Just lend a hand for a little while. You are aware of our suitability for it." Everyone knew that Dad's job loss was due to his repeated mouthing off to his supervisor, but there was a tale about downsizing. My older brother Jason had recently totaled his second vehicle of the year, and Mom, well, she had managed to arrange a girls' trip to Cancun, despite already being 2 months late on the mortgage. And me? I had the kind of exhilaration that comes only in your early 20s. And I was living in a studio apartment, furnished with furniture from junk stores. I wanted to think I could be of assistance without making any difference. I therefore sent money. At start, not much. Just enough to pay the light bill, groceries, and Jason's down payment on a new used car. Then the following month arrived, and the subsequent one. It settled become the norm. Tyler's tutor will cost $400. $800 to pay the real estate taxes. $3.60 to pay the mortgage off. Jason's wedding deposit. It hurt. He never reimbursed the venue and never married her. I didn't voice any complaints. Not aloud. I simply adapted. I consumed more ramen than I'll ever acknowledge. Took on side tasks. Skipped trips. Wait to start saving for a house. Since they were related. And family does that, isn't it? However, at some point, it ceased to be about assistance and began to focus on expectations. I wasn't thanked by them. They made jokes about it. Having a clean apartment and no children must be nice. Miss Fancy Job and her tiny laptop are here. It was a joke all the time. At my expense, always. I grinned as well. Initially, I shared their laughter, until the laughter became painful. Particularly when Christmas arrived, I gave thoughtful gifts to everyone one year. Grandma received a heated blanket because she was often complaining about the draft. Mom received a spa package. And Jason received a smartwatch. Do you know what I have? Socks. From a cheap retailer. The sticker was still on them. Mom said, "You don't need anything." When I arched an eyebrow, "Everything is already yours." As if I was self-centered for being stable, I began keeping track after that. Not only in the mind, literally, receipts, bank transfers, every "can you help with?" Screenshot, each just this once. Because something began to change inside of .me. Perhaps it was Jason's eye roll when I declined. Perhaps it was the icy tone of Mom's voice when I paused. Or perhaps it was simply the painful, delayed realization that I wasn't what they valued, it was all I had to offer. When did I quit giving? There was no check-in. They interrupted me. Dinners with the family took place without me. There was silence in the group texts. Nobody inquired about my well-being. All of a sudden, I was too cold, too distant, and too sensitive. However, what they were unaware of was that I had begun to record every detail. Not to exact revenge, to avoid putting it in their face. However, I had to tell myself that I wasn't insane, that I wasn't just dreaming, that it had indeed been biased. I brought that folder to the Christmas dinner. Right. There were only a few notes at first, a couple of bank statements, and, eventually, it turned into a chronicle of my quiet, the invoices for everything they casually overlooked. Because occasionally, when others fail to see your value, you must demonstrate it to yourself. I had finished serving as their safety net. Their ATM is silent, their emotional arsenal, however, I didn't blow up. I refrained from screaming. I just finished getting ready. And when Jason told me to leave that Christmas table when he got up, he was unaware that the loudest truth of all had been brought by the quiet one. Jason eyed the folder as if it were going to bite him. "What is this?" he inquired, his voice still brimming with the arrogant assurance he always displayed when he believed he was ahead. I took a while to respond. I merely observed from a distance. He pulled it open. The first page. Page 2. The third follows. When it finally happened, his grin vanished. He furrowed his brows. He appeared perplexed. Pale after that. Everything was there, each and every Venmo transfer. All of the texts that began, "Hey, could you just assist me once?" When Mom threatened to be evicted. I paid all of my bills. Jason always promised to pay me back, but he never did. Over his shoulder, his wife leaned. Sharply, she said, "What is this?" Jason didn't answer, so I did. I answered calmly. "It's documentation. Every debt, each and every payment. I never received any return favors since 2017. Jason's spouse turned to a new page. Her expression also changed. Mom's voice was tight as she leaned forward. "What are you doing, Kelly?" I added. "I want to remind everyone who has been keeping this family together while you acted like I was the issue." Jason kept onto the folder as she attempted to drag it toward her. The room grew quieter as he turned the pages more quickly. Everyone seemed to be watching a fire break out, but no one took any action to put it out. Special expenses was the name of one division. The actual gut punches were delivered there. The week Mom shared vacation pictures from a Vegas resort. I sent $5.00 to pay her property taxes. I sent a thank you text after contributing $800 to Jason's son's summer program because no one else did. Then Jason froze on page 23. He ceased to flip, simply gazed. "What is this?" he whispered. I slightly leaned forward. "That credit card statement demonstrates that you reserved a lavish Miami suite. You told your wife that you were working late that weekend in order to pay your bills." His wife's mouth clenched. She gently turned to face him. But wait, that weekend was our anniversary. You claimed you were unable to go? Jason remained silent. He didn't have to. Without saying a word, she got up, picked up her purse, and walked out of the room. The door had already closed behind her. But Jason stammered excuses and followed her halfway. Quiet. Mom hit the table with her wine glass. Christmas was ruined by you. Calm and clear. I turned to her. No. I simply quit acting like nothing was wrong. Dad hadn't mentioned anything yet. He simply gazed at the table as if it were about to engulf him. I gave him a look. You witnessed their treatment of me. And you allowed it to occur. Nothing has changed. No defense, don't deny. Nothing. Except emptiness. I stood up and remarked, "This isn't about retaliation. Accountability is at issue here." Mom folded her arms. You had the option to say no. Yes, I did say no, I answered. And observe what transpired. I was iced out. You dismissed me. You voted me out. Jason's voice was scratchy and low when he eventually spoke again. Do you believe that this demonstrates our terrible character? No, I replied. I believe it demonstrates that you never considered me a sister, only a resource. Grandma cleared her throat after remaining silent the entire time. Kelly, this isn't the place or the time. I looked over at her. It's precisely the right moment, because you're all here for once. Nobody can pretend for once. Jason took up the folder again. You have an obsession. No, I muttered. I'm simply sick of being forgotten. I took out another envelope after that. This is legal documentation rescinding all financial and emergency responsibilities I ever took on for this family, I said, holding it up. Power of attorney. Contacts for emergencies. Everything. With instant effect, Mom let out a gasp. You're not serious. I'm not kidding, I declared. And at last, I'm finished. Dad raised his head. For a moment only. Perhaps we relied too much on you. Perhaps. I said it again. I was drowning. Dad, you also gave me additional bricks. Jason's face contorted into an almost pathetic expression. You're only interrupting us. So what? Like that? No, I replied. Not exactly like that. 5 years passed. $100,000. And this evening, that file, that isn't retaliation. That's my limit. I was voted out by you. I just formally announced it. The door was not slammed by me. I didn't shout. I didn't provide them the scene they most likely hoped for or even anticipated. I simply left. Into the silence. Into the chilly December night. Additionally, I didn't peek over my shoulder for the first time in years. When I went outdoors, the wind was strong, but it didn't hurt as much as it used to. It had a fresh feel, as if I could at last breathe without letting guilt taint every breath. I didn't go home right away. All I did was drive. No music, no place to go, only the hum of a heater that took too long to warm up and the sound of my tires on damp pavement. I finally pulled into the lakeside parking lot. When I was younger, when things were simpler and the world still made sense, my dad used to take me there, with the engine off and my fingers encircling the steering wheel. I sat there for a time, even though it was closed. The folder in the passenger seat was still rather noisy, and to tell the truth, I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel like I had won. All I felt was emptiness. Not depressed, not sorry, simply hollow. Because it hurts to know that the people you care about the most never saw you. No matter how correct you are, there is grief even when you prepare and brace for it. Sadness for the family you continued to attempt to believe in. Sadness for the love you believed would manifest if you simply put in enough effort. I returned home and allowed the quiet to occupy the area I had previously kept packed with responsibilities. I also didn't try to correct it this time. I didn't send a lengthy explanation by SMS. I didn't call to apologize if that sounded harsh. I didn't try to patch things up with a follow-up email. I kept quiet, and the silence felt lovely for once. The following morning, I gently brewed coffee. I actually tasted it while sitting by the window. No inbox of emails is open. No calendar notification. No imminent danger. I also didn't reach for the phone when it didn't ring. I simply existed. I accomplished little things that felt large in the days that followed. In order to assist Jason with his power bill, I returned to the gym that I had left years prior. I made an appointment with a dentist. While browsing a bookstore, I allowed myself to purchase a hardback without double-checking the pricing. After that, I began going to therapy. Not because I was damaged, however, I didn't want to harbor resentment. Because I didn't want to face the next phase of my life with a heart full of grudges. I wanted to know why I had thought I owed everyone everything for so long. Why choosing myself felt like a betrayal. It wasn't a simple task. However, it was truthful, and I began to transform gradually. When I had done nothing wrong, I stopped saying I was sorry. I ceased to define my boundaries as though they were debatable. I quit allowing guilt to be the dominant factor in my life. Then the messages began to arrive, a week or so after Christmas. The first one, from Jason. You got your point across. Now repair the harm. Mom is still in tears. Dad has elevated blood pressure. Is that what you truly want on your conscience? I looked at it for a while. I then removed it. Mom gave 2 days later. The moment has come to move on. We were all feeling sentimental. Family, however, is family. We cannot simply ignore one another. Don't apologize. No possession. Just higher standards. I didn't respond. I modified my emergency contacts instead. The previous joint savings account was frozen. I began searching for flats in a new city that I had always wanted to call home, but had never had the courage to do so. And I wasn't afraid to start over for the first time. I was no longer bound by their mayhem. I went out with old friends that I hadn't seen in a long time. I had pushed them away since I was always too preoccupied with taking care of other people's problems. They greeted me with open arms when I returned, and I laughed without resentment underneath it for the first time in years. I uploaded a picture from supper. No caption, only grins. That's when the ripple started. My cousin Laura, who cheered when Jason voted me out, sent me a message. I had no idea that you covered my tuition. I assumed my parents were the source. I apologize. Really. Then from the now ex-wife of Jason, for years. He misled me. I appreciate you telling me the truth. I put the documents in the file. And one I didn't anticipate, a direct message from someone I hadn't spoken to since college. I read your story. I wanted to express my pride in you. It couldn't have been simple. They were correct. It wasn't simple. However, it was required. Since I didn't feel worn down by other people's expectations every morning when I got up and breathed in that new life. It reminded me, my narrative did not stop here. It was just the start. 3 weeks passed before the last effort was made. A letter, written by hand. I recognized the handwriting as well as the sound of my own name, even though there was no return address. Mom gave it to me. The front and back are 3 full pages. The first page was written with care. There was just enough tenderness to suggest that she could have understood. She wrote about how Christmas time went out of hand, how Jason had permitted his feelings to overpower him, how she had imagined I could manage more because I was always the one with the strength. The second page moved. All of a sudden, it was guilt rather than reflection. Dad wasn't asleep. Grandma was often inquiring about me. Jason's daughter Ellie had said that this year's Christmas felt weird, and I sensed it coming on the third page. Their mortgage payments were past due. Dad's insurance did not cover his prescription. Drugs. Spousal support was being demanded by Jason's ex-wife. Then came the statement I had seen much too often. All we need is a little assistance. Again. Just once. We swear that we won't ask again. I read it twice. After that, fold it nicely, and threw it in the garbage. Not because I was angry. However, since I at last realized I wasn't missed by them, I gave them something. But they missed it. Dependability. They never had to construct a safety net for themselves. It wasn't affection. It served a practical purpose. I'm not a utility either. I was surprised by how sharply the truth hit me. However, not in the same manner as before. This time, no tears were shed, no pacing the room, wondering if I had overreached myself. Just a little quiet, the kind that descends after a storm. When you discover that the roof has held up admirably. I poured a glass of wine that evening. In my new home, I sat by the small electric fireplace and remembered that Christmas, that was when Jason got up, tapped his glass, and told me to get out of here. The irony. Yes, I did. Not in the manner they had hoped. I vanished from their story. Long before I knew I could leave their stage, I was cast in the part. The script was still burning when I left it. I received a call from an unidentified number a week later. I rang it out. No voicemail. Then an SMS message. Please, Dad is hospitalized. I assumed you would want to know. Jason was the one. No justification. Don't apologize. He believed that I couldn't overlook only one card. And I might not have once. I sat with it this time, though. I gave in to my emotions, whether they were perplexity, anxiety, or despair. After that, I made a crucial decision. I refused to let biology dictate my limits. Dad could have answered the phone himself if he had wanted me there. Mom would have begun with, "I'm sorry," not "we need." If she had meant what she wrote, rather than respond, I made a straight call to the hospital. On his floor, he asked for the nurse, verified that he was stable, and it was sufficient. Because I no longer had to sacrifice myself to show that I cared, to regain my humanity, I didn't have to enter a room. More than they ever detested my remarks, they detested my silence. I took a new work in a different city a few days later. Better times, greater income, above all, a new beginning. I packed the essentials, gave away what I didn't. The life that always kept me just close enough to be utilized was softly let go. That move wasn't depressing, it was quiet. I have a new phone number, blocked the older ones. Began attending activities in the area. I made new acquaintances who only asked for honesty from me. Even a dog was adopted by me. Milo is his name. He only cares that I return home, not about my history. I was sitting on my balcony one evening with a new acquaintance by my side, and Milo sleeping at my feet when she asked, "Will they ever change, in your opinion?" As I gazed out at the city lights. I considered it for a moment. "I'm not sure," I replied, "but I'm not responsible for that anymore." Then she posed another query, "Are you missing them?" And I had to sit with that one. Because of the truth. Occasionally, however, I miss their concept more than their actuality. And that's what ultimately freed me. With a family like mine, you don't go without any wounds, however. Staying doesn't help you get better either. The most self-loving thing you can do at times is to halt the bleeding for those who are unaware that you had been slashed. So here I am. No more folders. Spreadsheets are over. No more battling for a place at a table that was consistently rigged. I'm at peace now. Not that everything is flawless, but because I ultimately made my own decision. Because I no longer waited on them to fulfill my needs. And for me, I became that person. And because the holidays are too loud, whether you're out there listening to this in your car, on your couch, or hiding in the bathroom, I would like you to know, you're perfectly okay for leaving. Setting limits does not make you selfish. Your decision to prioritize peace above performance is not callous. You're just finished. And that's all right. Because sometimes the loudest form of retaliation isn't actually retaliation. It's getting better. It's living well, too. And believe me, they will never hear stillness so loud. You eventually come to the realization that the individuals you continued to show up for were only keeping you around because you consistently said yes. Furthermore, the silence that ensues after you eventually say no is not an indication of rejection. It's enlightening. Family is more than just kinship. It's deference. It's reciprocity. It's being aware of your importance even when you're not required. If you've been the fixer, the provider, the strong one for years, consider this a reminder. It is okay for you to stop. You're free to recover. Because it is not selfish to choose peace. It is a matter of survival.